In the dusty streets of Golden Pass, Texas, where the sun scorches the earth and secrets simmer beneath the surface, a black SUV rolled to a stop outside the schoolyard, its tinted windows hiding eyes that watched children play. But for what sinister purpose? On that quiet autumn morning, the town's 50 veterans, hardened by wars they thought were behind them, had no idea they'd soon face a cartel so ruthless it trafficked not just drugs, but human lives. One hero would fall shielding a child, another would forgive a traitor with his dying breath. What would you sacrifice to protect the innocent? If this story grips you, hit subscribe and help us reach our first 1,000 supporters, because the battle for Golden Pass is just beginning. In the dusty streets of Golden Pass, Texas, where the sun scorches the earth and secrets simmer beneath the surface, a black SUV rolled to a stop outside the schoolyard, its tinted windows hiding eyes that watch children play. But for what sinister purpose? On that quiet autumn morning, the town's 50 veterans, hardened by wars they thought were behind them, had no idea they'd soon face a cartel so ruthless it trafficked not just drugs, but human lives. One hero would fall shielding a child, another would forgive a traitor with his dying breath. What would you sacrifice to protect the innocent? If this story grips you, hit subscribe and help us reach our first 1,000 supporters, because the battle for Golden Pass is just beginning. The air hung heavy that day, thick with the scent of mesquite and the promise of trouble. Golden Pass wasn't much to look at. An unassuming border town of 28,000 souls, its main street lined with weathered storefronts and cracked sidewalks. To the casual eye, it was a place where time moved slow, where ranchers tipped their hats and kids chased each other through the dusty lots. But beneath its sleepy veneer, Golden Pass held a quiet strength. 50 veterans scattered among its homes and ranches, men and women who'd seen the worst of humanity on foreign soil and chosen this patch of Texas to call their own. John Mason walked his usual route along Main Street, his boots crunching against the gravel. At 62, the retired Marine Corps colonel still carried the posture of command, though a faint limp betrayed an old shrapnel wound from Fallujah. His gray eyes scanned the horizon, a habit forged in decades of vigilance. He stopped at Rosa Martinez's market, where the elderly widow was arranging tomatoes under a faded awning. "Morning, Rosa," he said, lifting a crate with a grunt. "Any visitors lately?" Rosa's weathered face tightened, her hands pausing over the produce. "Last night," she whispered, "2 men in a black truck just sitting across the street, watching." John nodded, his jaw clenching. He didn't need to ask more. Rosa's son, a Marine like him, had taught her to spot trouble. "Keep your phone close," he said, forcing a smile. "Emily's brewing coffee at the Last Stand. Join us if you can." The Last Stand coffee shop stood at the heart of Golden Pass, its walls plastered with faded photos of desert deployments and jungle patrols, mementos from the veterans who made it their unofficial hub. Emily Carter wiped the counter with a practiced flick, her sharp eyes darting to the street every few seconds. A former Army intelligence officer, she'd spent 15 years deciphering enemy patterns in Kabul and Baghdad. Now, at 38, she ran the shop with the same precision, her dark hair pulled tight in a bun. John slid into his usual stool and she set a black coffee before him. No sugar, just how he liked it. "They're getting bolder," she said, voice low. "Yesterday, they trailed the Thompson kids home from school." John's hand tightened around the mug, the porcelain warm against his calloused fingers. "They're mapping us out," he said. The bell jingled as Luke Navarro stepped in, his broad frame filling the doorway. The ex-Navy SEAL moved with a predator's grace, his tanned skin marked with scars from 100 covert ops. Behind him came David Hawk Reynolds, a lean Delta Force vet with eyes that never stopped scanning. They joined John at the counter, exchanging nods like soldiers falling into formation. "Border patrols stretched thin," Luke reported, accepting a coffee from Emily. "Spotted 3 new crossing points along my ranch last week." David leaned in, his voice a gravelly whisper. "My contacts say it's Los Lobos del Norte. Their boss, Javier Morales. He's different, methodical, ruthless. John sipped his coffee, letting the bitterness ground him. They'll start with businesses, he said. Protection money first, then families. Standard playbook. Rosa shuffled in, her apron dusted with flour. They tried my store yesterday, she said. 2 men, polite as snakes, offered security services. Emily's eyes narrowed, her intelligence training kicking in. Recognize them from our photos? Rosa nodded. The tall one, Felipe El Rio Mendoza. The other was new. John stood, his decision firm. We need a meeting tonight. Full council. The veterans nodded, understanding the weight of his words. They'd been watching, waiting. Now it was time to move. By dusk, 20 veterans gathered in the last stand's back room, a map of Golden Pass spread across a rickety table. Sheriff Rachel Hayes, a former military police officer with a no-nonsense stare, spoke up. They've tested our response times. 3 incidents last week, all coordinated. Emily pointed to the map. Small hits spaced out. They're probing for gaps. Luke cleared his throat, his voice rough. My ranch hands saw a truck with Mexican plates last night. Not just scouting, something heavier. David studied the map, his Delta instincts humming. They're setting up on both sides of the river. That new import company, the construction outfit, their fronts. A civilian voice broke in. Anna White, a local teacher with a knack for networks. What about the rest of us, the ones who didn't serve? John's gaze softened, but his tone stayed firm. You're our priority. We protect our own, but smart. No confrontation yet. Let them think they're winning. Outside, that same black SUV cruised past, its occupants noting the cars behind the shop. Inside, the veterans planned with the precision of a unit gearing for war. John stepped onto his porch later, the stars piercing the Texas sky. Rosa joined him, her voice low. They followed me home tonight. 2 cars, obvious about it. Good, let them think they're in control. His hand slipped to his phone, sending a coded text, Phase 1 at dawn. As Rosa turned to leave, a child's scream echoed from the schoolyard across town, a sound cut short by the roar of an engine. John's gut twisted. What were they planning? He glanced at Rosa, her eyes wide with fear, and whispered, We'll find out tomorrow. The night settled over Golden Pass, a town on the edge of a storm none could predict. The scream from the schoolyard lingered in John Mason's ears as he stood on his porch, the Texas night wrapping Golden Pass in a deceptive calm. He'd heard screams like that before, sharp, innocent, cut off too soon, in villages half a world away, and they never meant anything good. By dawn, the town stirred uneasily, whispers of that black SUV spreading like wildfire through the dusty streets. Los Lobos del Norte had made their first move, and John's 50 veterans, scattered across ranches, homes, and quiet corners, knew the clock was ticking. What they didn't yet grasp was the depth of the cartel's hunger, not just for power, but for human lives to fuel their border empire. Inside the Last Stand coffee shop, the morning light filtered through bullet-scarred blinds, relics of a bar fight years back, now a silent testament to the town's resilience. Emily Carter poured coffee with a steady hand, her intelligence officer's mind already piecing together fragments. That scream last night, she said, sliding a mug to John. Rachel's deputies found tire tracks near the playground, but no kids missing. Yet, John's gray eyes narrowed, the lines on his face deepening. They're testing us, seeing how fast we react. Luke Navarro shoved through the door, his steel frame taut with urgency. Dust clung to his boots from an early patrol along his ranch. Found something, he growled, dropping a crumpled photo onto the counter, a grainy shot of his own daughter, Mia, 12, walking home from school. Taped to my fence post, they're targeting families now. The air thickened with unspoken rage. David Hawk Reynolds leaned in, his Delta Force calm masking a coiled intensity. It's Los Lobos' playbook. Scare the civilians, soften the target. Rosa Martinez shuffled in, her apron stained with flour, her voice trembling. They came back last night, left this under my door. She held out a note, scrawled in jagged Spanish, "Pay or bleed." John took it, his fingers brushing hers, a small comfort in the rising storm. "They're hitting businesses too," he said. Squeezing from all sides, Emily's eyes flicked to the map on the wall, marked with red pins from last night's meeting. "Felipe Mendoza's crew," she said. "I'd bet my shop Sofia Vega's with them. She's Javier Morales' shadow, his brain." Across town, Javier El Alfa Morales sat in a motel room on Golden Pass's outskirts, the hum of a cheap fan cutting through the silence. At 45, he carried the lean menace of a predator, his dark eyes glinting with calculation. A map of the town lay before him, dotted with targets: Rosa's Market, Luke's Ranch, the school. Beside him, Sofia Vega studied surveillance photos, her sharp mind already sniffing something off. "This town's too quiet," she murmured, tapping a shot of John helping Rosa with her crates. "No panic, no chaos. They're hiding something." Javier smirked, lighting a cigarette. "They're sheep, Sofia. We've broken tougher places." But Sofia's frown deepened. She'd seen towns buckle under Los Lobos' weight. Golden Pass wasn't buckling. "Maybe," she said, "but sheep don't watch back." Javier exhaled smoke, his confidence unshaken. He had a deadline, a rival cartel breathing down his neck demanding he secure this stretch of border for their human trafficking pipeline. Golden Pass wasn't just a prize, it was survival. Back at the last stand, the veterans convened again, the back room thick with tension. Sheriff Rachel Hayes spread incident reports across the table. 3 businesses got hit last night, same security pitch. My deputies can't keep up. Luke slammed a fist down. "They're stalking my kid, Rachel. We need to hit back." John raised a hand, his voice steady. "Not yet. We strike too soon, they'll know what we've got. We watch, we wait, we learn their path." Emily projected a grainy photo onto the wall. Felipe Mendoza, broad-shouldered and scarred, stepping from that black SUV. "He's their enforcer," she said. "But Sofia's the one to watch. She's ex-military, Mexican Special Forces, smart enough to smell us out." David nodded, tracing a finger along the river on the map. "Luke's right about the crossings. I counted 5 vehicles last night, too heavy for drugs alone. Something bigger's moving." Anna White, the civilian teacher, hovered near the door, her voice cutting through the military hum. "You're all talking war, but what about us? My students are scared. Parents are pulling kids from school." John met her gaze, his tone softening. "Anna, we're not leaving you defenseless. We're building a net." Quietly. "They think we're weak, and that's our edge." Anna crossed her arms, unconvinced. "And if they take one of my kids before your net's ready?" The question hung heavy, unanswered. Luke's jaw tightened, his hand brushing the photo of Mia. John stood, his limp more pronounced as he paced. "Tonight we double patrols. Luke's ranch, the school, Rosa's place. Civilian cover only, no uniforms, no guns showing. Rachel, your deputies play dumb, slow response. Let Los Lobos think they've got us scrambling." Nods rippled through the room, but Anna's eyes lingered on John, doubt flickering. As night fell, Golden Pass seemed to shrink under the weight of unseen eyes. Luke crouched in the brush near his ranch, binoculars tracking a truck with Mexican plates rumbling past. Its cargo shifted, a muffled cry escaped the tarp. His blood ran cold. Was it Mia? No, too faint, too desperate. He radioed Emily. "They're moving people, live cargo." Her voice crackled back, sharp with realization. "Human trafficking, that's their endgame." Meanwhile, Javier met his crew in a derelict barn south of town, Sofia at his side. "Push harder," he ordered. "Tomorrow we hit the school. Grab a kid, make them beg." Sofia hesitated. "Javier, if they're organized." He cut her off, voice ice. "They're not. Break them fast, or we're dead to the Sinaloa crew." Sofia nodded, but her gut twisted. She'd seen John's posture in that photo, too steady, too ready. Back in town, John sat alone at the last stand, the lights dimmed. The scream from last night replayed in his mind, a ghost from battles past. Rosa's note lay crumpled on the counter, a child's cry echoing in his ears. He texted the team, eyes on the school, now. Outside, that black SUV prowled again, its engine a low growl in the dark. What would they take next? The dawn broke over Golden Pass with a blood-red hue, casting long shadows across the scrubland that edged Luke Navarro's ranch. The cry he'd heard from that truck last night gnawed at him, a jagged echo of a memory he couldn't shake. His daughter's voice, lost forever in a Kandahar ambush 10 years ago. He'd radioed Emily Carter about the human cargo, and now, as the town stirred with unease, the veterans of Golden Pass faced a reckoning. Los Lobos del Norte wasn't just after their money or their fear. They were trafficking lives, and the scream from the schoolyard was only the beginning. Luke crouched in the mesquite brush near his fence line, his binoculars trained on the riverbank where the truck had vanished. His ranch sprawled across the border's edge, a patchwork of cattle trails and hidden gullies he knew like his own scars. The air buzzed with tension as Hannah Lee's Cessna droned overhead, her voice crackling through his earpiece. "Luke, I've got eyes on something, half a mile south near your old barn. Tarps, guards, movement. It's a camp." His gut twisted. "People?" he asked, voice rough. "Can't tell yet," Hannah replied, "but it's no cattle operation." John Mason's voice cut in over the radio, steady but firm. "Luke, hold position. We need intel, not a fight." Luke's jaw clenched. He'd held position in Afghanistan, waiting for orders while his unit burned, and his daughter, embedded with a medical convoy, never came home. "John, if they've got kids in there," he started, but John interrupted. "We move smart, not fast. Wait for the team." Luke clicked off the radio, his hands trembling. He couldn't wait, not again. Inside the last stand, Emily pored over Hannah's aerial photos, her intelligence training kicking into overdrive. The grainy images showed a makeshift compound, tarps strung between poles, shadows moving beneath, and armed men pacing the perimeter. "It's a holding site," she said, pinning the shots to the map. John stood beside her, his limp more pronounced after a sleepless night. "Trafficking," he muttered. "Pinnaco's heavy is turning us into his pipeline." Sheriff Rachel Hayes leaned in, her badge glinting. "Border Patrol's too thin to catch this. We're on our own." Mike Torres burst through the door, his medic's bag slung over his shoulder. The ex-combat medic's warm brown eyes carried a quiet strength, honed in Iraq, patching up soldiers under fire. "Luke's not answering," he said. "He's gone dark." John cursed under his breath, grabbing his radio. "Luke, report now," Static answered. Emily's gaze flicked to John. "He's going in. You know why?" John's face hardened. He did know. Luke's daughter haunted him, a ghost driving every reckless move. At the river, Luke crept closer, the barn's rusted outline looming through the brush. He spotted the camp, a dozen women and children huddled under tarps, their wrists bound, their faces etched with terror. 2 guards smoked near a truck, rifles slung lazily over their shoulders. Then he saw her, a girl, no older than 5, her dark hair tangled, her eyes wide with the same fear Mia's once held. His breath caught. "Damn it," he whispered, unslinging his rifle, an old hunting piece, not military, to keep their cover. He signaled Mike, who'd followed despite John's orders. "We're getting them out," Luke hissed. Mike nodded, his medic's calm unshaken. "I've got your 6, let's move." They slipped through the brush, shadows among shadows, until a twig snapped under Mike's boot. The guards spun, shouting in Spanish, and gunfire erupted. Luke dropped one with a clean shot, but the second sprayed bullets into the camp. A woman screamed as a round grazed her arm, then the girl bolted, stumbling toward the river. "Cover me," Mike yelled, sprinting after her. Luke fired, pinning the guard, but more Los Lobos men poured from the barn, their shouts echoing. Mike reached the girl, Lily, she'd later say her name was, scooping her into his arms as bullets tore through the air. "Why, you're okay, kid," he murmured, his voice a balm against her sobs. Then a sharp crack split the dawn. Blood bloomed across his chest. and he staggered, shielding Lily with his body. "You'll be okay," he gasped, collapsing as Luke roared his name. Luke dragged Mike and Lily back to cover, his hands slick with blood, Mike's blood. The medic's eyes fluttered, a faint smile tugging his lips. "Tell John I couldn't wait either," he whispered, then went still. Luke's scream was raw, primal, as he fired blindly at the retreating guards. Hannah's Cessna buzzed low, scattering the cartel crew, and Luke clutched Lily, her tiny frame trembling against his. "You're safe now," he choked out, though his heart shattered anew. Back at the last stand, John slammed his fist on the counter as Luke's radio crackled to life. "Mike's down," Luke said, voice breaking. 15 out, 10 still trapped. They're moving him. Fast." Emily's face paled, her hands shaking as she marked the map. "We lost him," she whispered. John's voice was steel. "We didn't lose him. Luke did. He moved too soon." Rachel grabbed her keys. "I'm calling Border Patrol, but they won't make it in time." Across town, Javier Morales paced the motel, Sofia Vega at his side. "Your men hit a camp?" she asked, her tone sharp. Felipe Mendoza shrugged, lighting a cigar. "Some cowboy played hero. We'll finish it tomorrow." Sofia's eyes narrowed. "They're not cowboys. That plane wasn't civilian." Javier crushed his cigarette. "Then we hit harder. The school's next, make them bleed." At the ranch, Luke sat beside Mike's body, Lily clinging to his arm. Her tiny voice broke the silence. "He saved me," Luke nodded, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "He saved us all." But as Los Lobos' trucks rumbled away with the remaining captives, Luke knew the cost was just beginning. John's voice crackled through. "You broke us, Luke. Was it worth it?" The sun hung low over Golden Pass, painting the town in shades of orange and grief. Mike Torres's blood still stained the riverbank where Luke Navarro had dragged him, Lily's small hand clutching his sleeve as he stared at the body of his friend. The veterans had lost one of their own, a wound that cut deeper than any bullet. And the air thrummed with a restless anger. Los Lobos del Norte had slipped away with 10 captives, their trucks vanishing into the border haze, and now the town teetered on the edge of fracture. But the darkest blow was yet to come, lurking not in the desert, but within Golden Pass itself. At the Last Stand coffee shop, the back room was a storm of voices. John Mason stood at the head of the table, his limp pronounced as he leaned on the edge, his gray eyes hollow. "We've got 10 souls still out there," he said, voice rough. "Luke, you moved too fast, broke our cover. Now they know we're not just ranchers." Luke sat apart, Lily curled against him, her dark eyes wide and silent. "I'd do it again," he snapped, his seal scars glinting in the dim light. "Mike died a hero. You'd have let them all rot." Emily Carter slammed a stack of photos down, her hands trembling. "Enough. We're bleeding and they're laughing. Hannah's last flight spotted their trucks heading south, too fast for us to track." Sheriff Rachel Hayes paced, her badge catching the light. "Border Patrol's an hour out. My deputies can't move without evidence, and we've got none." David Hawk Reynolds traced the map with a finger, his Delta calm unshaken. "They'll hit us again soon. Javier's not done." Across town, Javier El Aufan Morales leaned against a motel window, the cigarette in his hand glowing red. Sofia Vega sat at a makeshift desk, her sharp eyes scanning surveillance feeds. Shots of Luke's ranch, Rosa's market, the schoolyard. "Your hero cost us half the shipment," she said, voice tight. Felipe Mendoza smirked, cleaning his pistol. "We'll get it back. School's ripe. Grab a kid, they'll break." Sofia's frown deepened. "That plane wasn't random. They've got training, military, not cowboy." Javier crushed his cigarette. "Then we cut deeper. Find their weak spot." Sofia's screen flickered, a new feed popping up, courtesy of Ethan Cole, a Golden Pass local with a gaunt face and desperate eyes. Ethan had been John's friend since their Marine days, a mechanic who'd settled here with his son Caleb, now 10 and battling leukemia. Los Lobos had found him a week ago, offering a deal, information for treatment money. Ethan's voice trembled over a burner phone. They're hiding the rescued ones in the old church basement. Patrols at the ranch, school, market. Sophia's lips curled. Good. You've earned your boy's next round. Back at the last stand, Anna White burst in, her teacher's poise cracking. Parents are pulling kids from school. Rumors say you're starting a war. My class is down to 5. John met her gaze, exhaustion weighing his words. Anna, we're protecting them. We just need time. Anna's voice rose. Time? Mike's dead, and you're losing. The room split, half nodding with Luke, half staring at John. Then the radio crackled. Hannah's voice, urgent. Trucks moving north, 3 miles from town, armed heavy. Emily's head snapped up. They're coming for the church. John grabbed his coat. Luke, David, with me, Rachel, slow your deputies, keep it sloppy. But as they moved, a shadow lingered. Ethan, hovering near the door, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. John, he muttered, I need to talk. John waved him off. Later, Ethan, stay safe. The church basement was a damp, echoey vault, its stone walls hiding the 15 rescued captives. Rosa tended to a woman's grazed arm, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. Lily sat apart, clutching a rag doll Mike had given her. Then the night shattered. Gunfire erupted outside, tires screeching as Los Lobos hit the church. 5 cartel men stormed in, led by a wiry thug with a scar across his cheek. Where's the rest? He barked, grabbing Rosa. She spat in his face, and he backhanded her, blood blooming on her lip. Upstairs, John, Luke, and David arrived just as the screams began. Luke charged, tackling the scarred man, but the others opened fire. Bullets ricocheted off stone, and a woman's cry cut off, her body crumpled, a child's wail rising in its place. David dropped 2 gunmen with precise shots, but the damage was done. 5 captives dead, their blood pooling on the cold floor. John dragged Rosa out, his shoulder grazed, while Luke shielded Lily, her doll soaked red. Outside, the cartel retreated, their message clear. No one was safe. John's radio buzzed. Emily, frantic. They knew exactly where to hit. Someone talked. John's eyes locked on Ethan, who stumbled from the shadows, tears streaking his face. John, I had to. Caleb's dying. They promised. John's fist clenched, but his voice was ice. You sold us out. For how much? Ethan sobbed. Enough to save him. Luke lunged, pinning Ethan to the wall. Mike's dead because of you. John pulled him back, his own heart breaking. Enough, Luke. We've lost too much already. Rachel cuffed Ethan, her face grim. He's mine now. But as they hauled him away, Lily's voice pierced the chaos. Why'd he do it? No one answered. The question hung like smoke. At the motel, Sophia replayed the church feed, her gut twisting. They fought back, organized. Ethan's tip wasn't enough. Javier's eyes darkened. Then we take everything. Tomorrow the school burns. Sophia nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. Golden Pass wasn't breaking, it was bending. And that scared her more. The sky over Golden Pass turned black as pitch, the stars swallowed by a storm rolling in from the border. The church basement massacre had left a scar, 5 lives snuffed out, their blood staining the stone where Rosa Martinez still knelt, whispering prayers through swollen lips. Ethan Cole's betrayal burned in the veterans' hearts, splintering their unity as Los Lobos del Norte prepared their final John Mason stood on his porch, rain pelting his weathered face, knowing the night would demand everything. Javier El Alfa Morales was coming to erase Golden Pass and its defiance from the map. Inside the Last Stand coffee shop, the air was thick with grief and resolve. Emily Carter's hands shook as she pinned new intel to the map. Hannah Lee's last flight had spotted 30 vehicles massing south of town, headlights cutting through the dark like wolves' eyes. They're bringing an army, she said, voice cracking. Javier's hired Mexican ex-Special Forces mercenaries? Luke Navarro paced, his limp from the river fight slowing him, Lily's rag doll tucked in his belt. They want the school, he growled. Ethan gave them the playbook. John's radio buzzed. Sheriff Rachel Hayes, her tone clipped. Border patrol's pinned down 5 miles out. We're alone. David, Hawk Reynolds, checked his rifle, his Delta Comma stark contrast to the chaos. They'll hit multiple points: school, church, ranch. Overwhelm us. John's gray eyes met each of theirs, his voice steady despite the ache in his shoulder. We don't break. We channel them. Make every street a trap. Luke nodded, his anger simmering. From Mike. Across town, Javier stood in a barn, rain drumming the tin roof, his crew of 100 cartel thugs and hired guns, loading weapons. Sofia Vega watched, her doubts festering. They're ready for us, she said, holding up Ethan's last transmission. School's week tonight. Javier's laugh was cold. Ready or not, they burn. No witnesses. Felipe Mendoza grinned, hefting a Molotov. School first. Let the screams do the work. Sofia's gut twisted. She'd trained with men like these veterans, and Javier was underestimating them. Back in Golden Pass, the veterans moved like ghosts. Luke and David rigged the schoolyard with floodlights and speakers, civilian gear, masking their military edge. Emily coordinated from the last stand, her radio alive with civilian reports. Anna White's network spotting trucks on the move. John met Ethan at the jail, the mechanic's wrists cuffed, his face gaunt. John, Ethan started, but John cut him off. Caleb's alive because of you. That's enough. Ethan's tears fell, a plea in his eyes. Let me help. The attack hit at midnight, a roar of engines and gunfire splitting the storm. 30 vehicles, trucks, SUVs, jeeps rigged with machine guns rolled into Golden Pass from 3 directions. Javier led the school assault, his mercenaries fanning out, Molotovs blazing. But the floodlights snapped on, blinding them, and speakers blared fake military chatter. Alpha team, flank left, sowing chaos. Luke fired from a rooftop, dropping 2, but a bullet grazed his leg, blood soaking his jeans. At the church, Felipe's crew hit hard, torching the doors. John and David fought back, their shots precise, but a mercenary's grenade blasted the wall, shrapnel tearing John's side. He stumbled, blood pooling, and saw Ethan, uncuffed, reckless, charge out, shoving a cartel thug away from Rosa. Get her out! John yelled, firing to cover them. Then a shadow loomed, a mercenary, rifle raised. Ethan lunged, taking the shot meant for John, his body crumpling as John roared, "No!" John dragged himself to Ethan, rain mixing with blood. "I forgive you," he gasped, clutching his friend's hand. "You're a father." Ethan's eyes flickered, a faint smile. "Tell Caleb." He went still, and John's scream was lost in the thunder. At the last stand, Emily's voice broke over the radio. "John's hit. They're everywhere." Luke, bleeding but unbowed, limped to the school's edge, facing Javier. "You're done," he spat, dodging a knife as he tackled the cartel boss into the mud. The counterstrike turned desperate. Emily flipped a switch, streetlights flared, disorienting the attackers, while David's traps, cars rigged to block roads, funneled them into kill zones. Rachel's deputies, playing dumb till now, joined Border Patrol, crashing from the south, cutting retreat. Luke wrestled Javier, his strength fading, a blade slicing his calf. "For Mike!" he roared, slamming Javier's head into the ground, the cartel leaders slumping unconscious. Dawn crept over a battered Golden Pass, smoke rising from the schoolyard. Javier's army fractured. Mercenaries fled, cartel thugs surrendered. Rachel cuffed Javier, his face bloodied, while Luke collapsed beside Lily, her doll clutched tight. John lay still, Rosa cradling his head, his breath shallow. "We held," he whispered, eyes fading. Emily rushed up, tears streaming. "John, stay with us!" But his hand slipped and silence fell. The town stood, scarred, bleeding but unbroken. Luke stared at John's body, then Ethan's, his voice a rasp. "Was it worth it?" Lily's small hand found his. "They saved me," she said, her words a fragile light in the dark. Golden Pass had fought its night of reckoning and paid in blood. The dawn broke over Golden Pass in a haze of smoke and sorrow. the storm's last echoes fading into a stillness that felt more like defeat than victory. Bullet-riddled walls and smoldering wreckage marked the schoolyard where Los Lobos del Norte had struck, their 30-vehicle assault leaving scars on the town's soul. John Mason's body lay beneath a tarp at the Last Stand coffee shop, his gray eyes closed forever, while Ethan Cole's sacrifice lingered like a bitter aftertaste. The veterans had held the line, but at a cost that hollowed them out. Yet from the ashes, a fragile light flickered, carried in the small hands of a girl named Lily. Luke Navarro sat on the shop steps, his leg bandaged, blood crusted on his jeans from the fight with Javier El Alfa Morales. Lily curled beside him, her rag doll stained red from the church clutched tight. His seal frame sagged, the weight of John's death and Mike Torres's loss pressing down. "We stopped them," he muttered, voice raw, "but it don't feel like winning." Emily Carter emerged, her face streaked with tears and soot, a first aid kit in hand. "We're still here," she said, kneeling to wrap his calf. "That's something." Sheriff Rachel Hayes coordinated cleanup, her deputies hauling Javier bruised and cuffed into a cruiser. Border patrols swarmed the town's edges, cataloging wreckage and rounding up surrendered cartel thugs. David Hawk Reynolds stood watch, his rifle slung low, his Delta eyes scanning for stragglers. "They're broken," he said, nodding at the fleeing mercenaries' taillights. Javier's empire's dust, but Emily's gaze lingered on John's tarp. "So are we," she whispered. Rosa Martinez hobbled up, her lips still swollen from Felipe's strike at the church. She carried a thermos of coffee, pouring it into cracked mugs with trembling hands. "He saved me," she said, her voice breaking as she glanced at Ethan's body draped nearby. "Ran out like a fool. Took that bullet." "Fool or not, he sold us out. Mike's gone because of him." Rosa met his glare, "And Caleb's alive because of him. What's that worth?" The question hung heavy as civilians crept from shelters, Anna White leading parents and kids back to the streets. Their faces were pale, eyes wide at the devastation, but a murmur rose. Gratitude, fear, anger. Anna approached, her teacher's resolve frayed. "You held them off," she said, "but look at us. Schools burned, homes shot up. Was this protection?" Emily stood, her voice firm. It was survival. They'd have taken more than buildings. Lily tugged Luke's sleeve, her voice small but piercing. "He saved me," she said, pointing at John's tarp, then Ethan's. "Both of them did." Luke's throat caught, his hand brushing her tangled hair. "Yeah, kid," he rasped, "they did." Her words sparked something. Emily's eyes hardened with purpose. "We rebuild," she said, "for them." She radioed Hannah Lee, "Get eyes up, make sure they're gone." Hannah's Cessna buzzed overhead, her voice crackling back. "Clear south, they're running." By midday, Golden Pass stirred to life, a wounded beast licking its wounds. Civilians joined the veterans, ranchers hauled debris, kids swept glass, Anna's students carried water to exhausted fighters. Ethan's widow, Sarah Cole, emerged from the jail, her son Caleb at her side, pale and thin from chemo. She knelt by Ethan's body, sobbing. "He begged me to forgive him," she said to Rachel. "Said he'd make it right." Rachel handed her a crumpled note. Ethan's last words scrawled in jail, "For Caleb, for John. I'm sorry." Luke watched, his anger warring with a flicker of pity. Sarah approached, holding out a wad of cash. Blood money from Los Lobos, stashed in Ethan's truck. "He wanted this for the town," she said, "for kids like Mike saved." Luke took it, his hands shaking. "Why, Mike," he said, voice breaking, "we'll call it that." Lily smiled faintly, clutching her doll. "For the hero," she added, and Luke's tears fell silent, unstoppable. At the school's edge, David and Rachel sifted through wreckage, finding Javier's satchel. Maps, names, trafficking routes stretching from Texas to Tijuana. "This is gold," Rachel said, bagging it for Border Patrol. "Their whole network's exposed." David nodded. John bought us that with his life. Across town, Hannah landed reporting no cartel movement. Los Lobos was shattered, their hired guns scattering to the wind. As dusk settled, Golden Pass gathered at the last stand, a battered community stitching itself back. Emily stood before them, John's coat draped over her shoulders. "We lost too much," she said, voice trembling. "But we're not done. This town's ours, every brick, every soul. We rebuild smarter, stronger." Luke limped forward, Lily at his side. "For Mike, for John, for Ethan's kid," he held up the cash. "Qui Mike starts today for our future." Rosa poured coffee, her hands steadier now. "They thought they'd break us," she said. "They didn't know us." Anna stepped up, her doubt softening. "You're not alone in this. We're with you." The crowd murmured assent, a spark of unity igniting. Luke knelt by Lily, pulling a bow and arrow from his truck, a gift he'd meant for Mia. "Want to learn?" he asked, his voice cracking. She nodded, and his smile broke through the pain. "We'll build it back, kid, day by day." The night closed over Golden Pass, its wounds raw but its heart beating. Javier's empire lay in ruins, but the veterans knew others would come. Emily stared at John's tarp, whispering, "You held us together." From the ashes, hope rose. Fragile, fierce, and unbroken. The sun rose over Golden Pass a week after the night of reckoning, its golden light glinting off bullet-pocked walls and fresh lumber stacked along Main Street. The town bore its scars proudly. Rebuilding had begun, driven by hands both calloused from war and soft from civilian life. The Last Stand coffee shop buzzed with purpose, its cracked windows now framed with photos of John Mason and Mike Torres, their sacrifices etched into the community's But as the veterans turned loss into strength, a shadow loomed beyond the border, a new enemy, watching, learning, and waiting to strike. Emily Carter stood at the counter, her dark hair loose for once, a map of the region spread before her. The Qui Mike cash, Ethan Cole's blood money, sat in a lockbox, earmarked for a clinic to honor the fallen medic. "We've got work," she said, her voice steady despite the grief lining her eyes. Luke Navarro limped in, his cane tapping the floor, Lily trailing him with a shy smile. "Border Patrol called," he said, tossing his East satchel onto the table. "Lopus is done. Network's collapsing, but someone's picking up the pieces." Sheriff Rachel Hayes joined them, her uniform dusty from patrol. "DA's got the satchel, trafficking routes, names, all of it. Golden Pass cracked their spine." David Hawk Reynolds leaned against the wall, his rifle swapped for a notepad. "Other towns are asking how we did it," he said. "They want our playbook." Emily nodded, pinning a letter to the map. "Sierra Vista, 50 miles east," thanking them for tips that stopped a cartel scout. "It's spreading," she said. "We're not just rebuilding here." Rosa Martinez poured coffee, her swollen lip healing into a faint scar. "They thought they'd bury us," she said, setting mugs down. "Now we're teaching others to stand." Anna White stepped in, her teacher's doubt replaced by determination. "My students drew up plans, neighborhood watches, signal codes. Civilians want in." Luke smirked, ruffling Lily's hair. "Even the kids are tougher than Javier figured." Lily held up her doll, now patched with a tiny bandage. "For Mike," she said, and Luke's throat tightened. Hannah Lee landed her Cessna at noon, striding into the shop with fresh intel. "Caught chatter south of the border," she said, spreading photos. "Black vans, unmarked, moving in tight formation. Not Los Lobos, too slick. Professional. They're watching us." Emily's eyes narrowed, her intelligence instincts flaring. "International outfit," she said. "Javier's collapse left a vacuum. Someone's stepping in and they're studying our moves." David traced the photos. "Military-grade gear. This ain't street thugs." The veterans gathered that night, a council of war turned to strategy. Emily took John's old spot, his coat still draped over her chair. "We've got a model," she said, sketching on the map. "Patrols, civilian lookouts, subtle traps. Sierra Vista used it, worked like a charm. But this new crew's different." Luke tapped his cane. They'll hit where we're weak. Families, kids. Like Javier tried. Rachel nodded. Dee's watching, but they're slow. We need to train others, fast. By week's end, Golden Pass became a beacon. Ranchers from Luke's network arrived, learning to spot crossings without firing a shot. Hannah taught civilian pilots to scan legally, their flights doubling as eyes for law enforcement. Anna's students drilled with radios, turning playground games into signal practice. It's not war, Emily told a group from Mesa Valley, it's awareness. Making your town a wall they can't climb, a grizzled rancher nodded. Lost a cousin to traffickers last year. Wish we'd known this then. But the shadow grew. Hannah's next flight caught a drone, sleek, unmarked, hovering over the school. They're mapping us, she radioed, voice tense. Emily's gut twisted as she replayed the footage at the last stand. They're not just watching, they're copying, she said. Our traps, our signals, turning it against weaker towns. David's jaw clenched. Smart bastards, we've got a fight coming, one we taught them how to wage. The next day, a federal agent, Agent Carter, no relation, rolled into town, his suit crisp against the dust. Your satchel's a gold mine, he said, spreading files, but this new outfit, La Sombra they're called, runs deeper. International cash, ex-spooks, they're hitting towns that can't keep up. He slid a photo across Luke's ranch, snapped from above. They're testing you. Emily's voice hardened. Let them try. We'll adapt. That night, Luke took Lily to his ranch, setting up a bow and arrow in the yard. His leg ached, but he smiled as she knocked an arrow, her shot wobbling but true. Good girl, he said, echoes of Mia in her grin. We're tougher than they think. She nodded, her doll at her side. For Mike and John? Luke's eyes stung. For them and us. Across town, Emily met Agent Carter in private, his offer sharp. Hand over your playbook or feds take it, could save lives. Or arm the wrong hands. She stared at John's coat, torn. Golden Pass rebuilt not just its streets, but its spirit. Qui Mike funded a clinic, its first patient, Caleb Cole, Ethan's son, his pale face brightening at the ribbon cutting. Sarah Cole hugged Luke, whispering, he'd be proud. Luke nodded, but his gaze drifted south, where La Sombra waited. The flame of defiance spread, but the cost loomed large. Golden Pass stood transformed under a crisp autumn sky 3 months after the night that claimed John Mason and shattered Los Lobos del Norte. The Last Stand coffee shop, its bullet holes now teaching points, thrummed with voices from across the border. Ranchers, teachers, pilots, all gathered to learn the town's hard-won lessons. The scars of war had faded into a quiet strength, but as the veterans passed their torch, a new threat, La Sombra, cast a shadow over their legacy. From ashes and blood, Golden Pass forged not just survival, but a beacon for a world watching in awe. Emily Carter stood before a crowd at the newly minted Golden Pass Community Defense Academy. John's coat draped over her shoulders like a mantle. We didn't just stop a cartel, she said, her voice carrying the weight of loss and pride. We showed what a town can do when it stands together. The room, once a simple meeting hall, gleamed with maps, radios, and photos of Mike Torres and John, their smiles eternal. Luke Navarro sat in the front row, his cane propped beside him, Lily's small hand in his. For them, he murmured, and she nodded, her bow slung across her back. Sheriff Rachel Hayes presented stats to the gathered leaders. 12 towns had adopted their model, thwarting cartel scouts without a shot fired. Crimes down 60% in protected zones, she said, pinning Sierra Vista's letter to a board. You're changing the border. David Hawk Reynolds led a workshop. His Delta precision guiding ranchers through subtle traps, cars angled to block roads, lights timed to blind. It's not about fighting, he said. It's about being untouchable. Nods rippled through the room. Golden Pass was no fortress, but a blueprint. Rosa Martinez served coffee, her scar a badge of resilience. They came for our lives, she told a Mesa Valley teacher. We gave them a lesson instead. Hannah Lee landed her Cessna, now part of a civilian air network spanning Texas, her latest flight spotting La Sombra vans, sleek, silent, retreating at her approach. "They're scared," she said, joining Emily, "but they're learning fast." Emily's jaw tightened. "They're turning our tricks against softer targets. We've got to stay ahead." The Kwai Mike Clinic opened that week. Caleb Cole, its first patient, his frail frame bolstered by chemo, funded by his father's last act. Sarah Cole cut the ribbon, tears glistening. "Ethan would have wanted this," she said, hugging Luke. "A piece of him lives here." Luke nodded, his anger softening into something like peace. He handed Lily a stethoscope, her grin mirroring Mike's old warmth. "You'll be a healer, kid," he said, voice rough, "like him." She clutched her patched doll. "And a fighter, like you." But the shadow of La Sombra grew. Agent Carter returned, his suit rumpled from a sleepless drive. "They hit 3 towns last week," he said, spreading photos. "Burned homes, empty streets, used your playbook. Drones, traps, misdirection. They're pros." "Ex-Intel, global cache." He slid a document to Emily. "Feds want your full system, legal framework, signals, all of it. Could dismantle La Sombra or arm them if it leaks." Emily stared at John's photo, his steady gaze urging her on. "I'll think on it," she said, voice tight. That night, Luke took Lily to the ranch, her arrow striking a target dead center under his proud eye. "You're getting good," he said, echoes of Mia in her laugh. She glanced south where La Sombra lurked. "Will they come back?" Luke's hand rested on her shoulder. "Maybe, but we'll be ready." Across town, Emily met David and Rachel in secret, the feds offer heavy between them. "Give it up, and we save thousands," David said. "Keep it, and we protect what John died for," Rachel countered. Emily's silence spoke volumes. By month's end, the academy drew delegates from 5 states. Civilian pilots trained by Hannah, teachers like Anna drilling kids in observation, ranchers learning from Luke's scars. "It's not about veterans," Emily told them. "It's about community, yours." A Sierra Vista rancher gripped her hand. "Lost my brother to traffickers. You gave us a way to fight back." But Hannah's next flight brought grim news. La Sombra drones over Mesa Valley, testing defenses they'd copied. "They're evolving," she warned. "We've got to, too." Golden Pass settled into its new role, a living testament to defiance. The clinic hummed with life, Caleb's laughter ringing as he played with Lily. Luke taught her archery daily, his limp easing with each lesson, a father's ghost healing through her. Emily stood at John's grave, the Fed's document in hand, whispering, "What would you do?" A letter from Lily slipped into her pocket. "You're my hope," it read, her childish scrawl a lifeline. She tucked it away, decision unmade. The town glowed with subtle strength. Streetlights doubled as signals, homes watched each other, kids carried radios like toys. La Sombra loomed, but Golden Pass stood unbowed. Emily addressed the academy's first graduates, her voice firm. "We're not just survivors, we're teachers. Take this home, make it yours." Luke handed Lily her first real bow, his smile breaking through years of pain. "For John," he said, "for Mike." As night fell, a drone buzzed faintly south, a whisper of the fight to come. Emily stared at the stars, John's coat warm against the chill. Golden Pass had lit a flame, but its legacy teetered. Share it and risk corruption, or guard it and let others fall? The answer waited, unwritten.